Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sapien Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. He is actually a well accomplished martial arts practitioner and an instructor. He has been practicing martial arts for over 30 years. Mr. Andrew Sabens is well known for this, and he is certified in jeetkunedo and in Filipino martial arts from well-known martial artists such as Paul Vunak, Jack McVicker, and the direct disciple of legendary Bruce Lee, Mr. Dan Inosanto. Mr. Sabens is also a third degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. He is a well-known public servant as well. He has honorably served in Carbondale Police Force for 20 years, out of which 7 years he has been a part of SWAT team as an operator. So I am very proud to have him today in my podcast. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You are so accomplished. When did you actually started doing the martial art?
It was probably around somewhere in between 1990 and 1991. I was in high school, and that's when I was I did a little bit, as of course, like most kids do. I did, the YMCA karate for a little bit when I was very young, but it wasn't until I was 15 or 16 years of age when I actually was introduced to it a little bit more and fell in love with it.
Oh, okay, awesome. So, because you said that you actually started early even in YMCA, so not every kid does that, right? So what kind of draw you into that?
I don't know. I think my generation growing up, it was outdoors. We weren't on the technical side of it. There wasn't a lot of gaming and stuff. So I was always active outside. We're come from a very athletic family. I had two older brothers, and so we're always very active. And I always liked acting like I was a ninja and stuff when we'd go outside and play. So I think, I don't know, I was just always drawn to it. I used to even, before I really got into it, I remember always getting like the black belt magazines and stuff, and always looking through them and being fascinated with like throwing stars and stuff like that. So it was just something that kind of was always an interest to me, but it wasn't until later on, in my teenage years when I got focused.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, I actually remember growing up. Sometimes I actually watched some of those cartoons, and that kind of inspired me to do this. Of course, not up to your mark, but yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, you are also correct that in those days, not everything was completely boxed in a 6-inch screen, and that definitely helped in that way. So how was your journey from there? So you started seriously doing martial arts in your high school. So how you actually kept doing it? How you pursued it?
Yeah, so I started. I was doing a summer job in my hometown, which is up in central Illinois, a little town called Paris, Illinois. And a family friend also worked there for summer help. He was older than me. He was my older brother's age, probably about 3 or 4 years older than me. And his name was Alex Lawson, because I give him, credit for everything. He's the one that really started this on me. And he at the time was training with Jack McVicker, as kind of helping him and going to seminars and stuff with Paul Vunak at that time period. And Alex wanted to get more training, and he knew, I was pretty athletic. I played sports, and he knew that I always had a little bit of an interest. So during that summertime, I think the first time was actually the drill called Hubud, Filipino martial art drill, was the first thing I learned. I remember we had just finished some job where we were painting or something. We were under a bridge, and he started showing me the hoobah drills and how fast you could be with your hands, and he was trapping me up, and I was just, I fell in love. It was from that point. So that's when I really started hitting it hard, and I actually became, he had, Alex at that time had a small group of people, maybe not even 10, I don't think, that, and there wasn't any set schedule when they'd get together and train. It was just they'd meet a couple times a week, and then I would train privately with Alex after work for the summer help. And it just kind of grew from there. I was the youngest one because I believe I was 16 at the time. So I remember driving, and they were all 18 and above, in starting into their college age as well. But yeah, I remember it was hardcore at that time because they were all younger and pretty intense. But that's kind of where it flourished, and I was exposed to jeetkunedo and the Filipino martial arts at that time, because I didn't really get grappling until a few years after. It wasn't until later on, and I still didn't like it even when I was introduced to it. That wasn't really my passion. I really gravitated towards more of the Jeet Kune Do and the Filipino martial arts, because that was my interest at that time period.
Okay. So if you could explain for the audience about the grappling thing, because not everybody would understand.
Sure, yeah. So the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, that kind of came about when everybody really started kind of getting witness to it, was in 1993 with the first UFC, because that's actually when I was exposed to. I mean, I've seen a little bit of it from my instructor Alex at the time showing it, and it's for those that don't know, it's all ground fighting based. There is striking and takedowns, but it's more, their emphasis is while you're on the ground. So they have joint manipulation, chokeholds, and controlling positions. And I remember clearly, it was after one of the first UFCs, my instructor had actually videoed it on a VHS, and he had kids at the time, little ones, and I remember him telling those kids to go run into the back room because he didn't want them out seeing the violence from the UFC, and he showed Royce Gracie just going through it and just winning with the ground fighting. And granted, you got to remember, I was high school at the time, and my ego was, oh, I'm going to stay on my feet and I'll be a stand-up fighter. And I remember Alex telling me at that time, like, you watch, he says, in about 5 to 6 years, he says, everybody is going to be implementing this into their styles of training. He says this stuff is way ahead of the time. And that's when he really started getting focused in on it. And he was traveling up to Chicago a lot at the time. I believe in the mid-90s, he went to a Hicks and Gracie seminar even, and he would bring it back and show us, our crew. And again, I didn't like it at the time. I did not want to be on the ground to fight. And it wasn't till, several years later when I actually was like, okay, I started getting that I need to learn this and implement this into my styles.
Okay. Did you by any chance had a chance to mix up between Filipino martial art or Jeet Kune Do with the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu?
Oh yeah. Because at that time, what Alex would do is when we would spar, we would go to the ground as well. So we were working at that time period, our boxing, our kickboxing. We would even do, simulate drills if we'd be knife fighting, then we'd have to throw down the knives. We'd do empty hand fighting. And then he would call out, we have to clinch. And then he would call out, we had to ground fight. So what he was doing was teaching us to chain link everything into play, from stand-up fighting to the weapon fighting, to the clinch fighting, and to the ground fighting. So we were putting it all into play at that time. But I just didn't really, it would happen so fast, I wasn't really able to differentiate too much of it at that time. But he was having us do that. So what people call today is mixed martial arts, we were doing it in the mid-90s. I just didn't know it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. So it's almost becomes more of a street style like freestyle fighting.
That's absolutely what it was. It was more geared for, it wasn't sport at that time. Alex was very street oriented and street mentality towards what he was teaching us. So yeah, no, I mean, nobody was doing MMA of the crew we fought with. I mean, I remember us when we trained, people would be in jeans and sometimes, and it just kind of, the reality. So it wasn't like how it is today, of how a lot of, people get the pushy gyms with the pretty mats and, comfortable settings. Our training, we were in a garage, I remember, with a space heater to keep us warm in the winter. It was a little more rugged and hardcore, but that's what Alex was about. He was very, very street oriented in what he was teaching to us. And I love that. And I'm glad I went through that time period for sure.
All right. So you actually then practiced jiu-jitsu for how many years then?
Yeah, I think I'm a little over 25 years because I knew I trained it a little bit at that time period, just learning a couple, but it wasn't until probably around 1998 when I started training more with Jack McVicker. We actually brought him down for a seminar here in Carbondale, Illinois at the university. I was running a club out of there, and he came down and gave us an actual seminar of, training just jujitsu. Wasn't any striking involved or anything. And I remember him telling me, he's like, Andy's, because I had done striking with him up until that point, and he says, your striking is, you're well versed in that, but you need to learn the jujitsu. And at that time, that's when we started doing it a little more. And we had one of my close friends at the time was a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and was down here. So he was kind of helping us while Jack was away, because Jack lived, 3 hours from me. So I wasn't able to get with him that much at that time. So that's when it kind of flourished from there. And I really enjoyed it because I was like, wow, this is great. You can kind of spar hard and I don't have to worry about getting headaches from boxing. And, so that's when I started to really grow with it, was in 1998. And that's when I got more focused with it.
Okay. Wow. So because you learned so many different styles, do you have any favorite?
I get asked that quite a bit. Ollie, the Filipino martial arts is still my passion. It's what always kind of drew me to the martial arts, was that and I look at it as it does everything. Filipino martial arts has a grappling art, dumog. They train in the weapons. They train empty hand. They have clinch work. There's even a Filipino martial art of biting and eye gouging called kinimutai. So they cover everything, and that's why to this day, I practice jujitsu probably the most, just for just again to protect my body as much as I can, but Kali has always been, and the Filipino martial arts has always been my favorite. That's always what kept me going with it. That's my passion for sure.
Yeah, I think we have spoken about that before, right? When I met you also, that I actually got interested, of course, in martial art from Chinese Kung Fu and watching Bruce Lee movies and all those things.
Yeah.
But very recently, I actually got interested into Kali, I would say. And then when I saw that you are so interested, I, naturally gravitated towards your style. So that was really, it's really a very complete martial art for sure.
It really is. And the problem, I had, because I used to have it in my curriculum, because I've been open now just over 10 years at the location I'm at. When I first started teaching there, Poly was implemented into the striking. So what I did is I do about half the class of boxing, Muay Thai boxing, and then the last half of the class would be Filipino martial arts. I just seemed that, we do stick or knife training, and it just seemed like people weren't having interest. Classes were getting smaller, and it wasn't until when I took the Filipino martial arts out of the striking program, that's when our classes just began to just get packed. I think, it's more because Kali's hard. It takes a lot of time, just learning the intricacies of the weapon. And I think people just find it harder when it's more a quick learn to do boxing and Muay Thai. And I think that's why people, started coming to the classes a lot more when I took that out, because I think they feared of looking silly or, feeling stupid training the Kali, because it is hard. It takes a lot of time, and that's just, unfortunate. But, now we started doing the Monday night Kali classes again. I think people are seeing like, wow, this is fun. And it's already, we've had 2 classes and it's already grown, from one week to the next. So I'm happy with how that's going, and it's getting me back to my roots and my passion. So I'm glad we got that
Oh,
going
wow,
again.
that's fantastic. That's really
Yeah.
great. All right, so um, I would like to know the schedules for sure, for the audience as well, so that they can actually take your classes. But before we go into that, of course, I really like to know the evolutionary process of your martial arts training and your instructor life, really. So you also mentioned that so the you know starting a martial art as a career itself, it's actually, even even if people who actually get trained in martial art, they don't really do those things. Most of them actually get into some kind of specific jobs or anything like that, or in many cases it becomes their hobby. But you actually kind of you became an entrepreneur on that side. So how was that journey? And if you can you know tell me about some of your struggles as well.
Sure. Yeah, it actually, the falling into the instructor role, kind of saying that, it was kind of by accident, because I was with Jack McVicker at the time. This would have been little, probably around 2001, 2002, because I ran the club at the rec center, so I count that as I was kind of the guy, because we knew what we were doing more than anyone at that time, because just nobody was training jeetkunedo and Filipino martial arts around here at that time period. So after I had graduated, when I was working, I was still training with Jack on a weekly basis. I'd go up and do private lessons, train at his group classes as well. And it was him that he sat down with me and he said, "Hey," he says, you have a good talent. You need to maybe look at maybe in the instructor role." And I was kind of already doing it at the time, because when I'd come back, I would have a small group. I probably had about 6 to 8 people at that time. And that's one of the struggles that also came up with that, was keeping my training partners motivated, because I was very obsessed at this. This would have been around 2001 to around 2008 time period. I mean, I lived, ate, and breathed martial arts, and I would sometimes burn my partners out a little bit. So that was hard. I'd go, they went, because they weren't into it as much as I was. And it was at that time when Jack was like, if you get something more structured, because what we would do then is, it was basically a text log. We'd text each other, "Hey, can we all get together at 5 o'clock today?" And then we'd meet. It wasn't it wasn't like Monday we're training or Thursday we're training. It was just whenever we could get together. And he told me, he says, "Well, to get something, a little more steady, and to help you out and to improve people, to get them better so I can make myself better," he said, "you need to get something structured." And it was at that time when I started to do that. So how I did it was, I would teach out of a fitness center for a little bit. I taught out of a women's fitness center for a little while. I'd rent space. I even did it at a gymnastics center for a short period, and another karate school I did it. So I was doing that to try to build up my student base. So it wasn't until actual 2013 when I opened up where I'm at now, and actually started my own school. So it was quite a time period. It wasn't like I just, "Hey, I'm going to open up a school and here's what I get." It was a hard struggle to get to that point, and keeping people consistent. And and at that time I was working. I had a kid in 2010, and wanting to compete a little bit on the side too. So I was taking on a lot. But yeah, it was looking back at it, because you don't reflect on it too much. But sitting here talking about it now, I remember that was one of the best things that Jack helped me with, was to get something structured, was to do that, to actually get a school, get set times to train, and then you have a regular schedule, and people will get better and get you better. So that's what helped.
Okay. So getting a space for martial arts, it was also kind of hard, hard to find the space as well.
Yeah, because it turned into, just because I didn't have enough student base to where I wanted to take that chance to get a big loan to rent a space or actually buy a place or, have my own lease. So what I do is just cut the cost, and I was able to get, a couple $100. I would get a couple hours a week out of a fitness center. So I was doing that just so I could get that uh, scheduled time and to build my student base. That was kind of the whole point of it. So yeah, it was hopping around for a little bit. I didn't have a steady spot for several years until where I'm at now. So it was hard.
Wow, that was smart as well. You know,
It was, so I didn't have to take a big hit on
right.
money because I wanted to have a student. When you got a student base, when you can go in and your first month you can cover rent no problem. That's a big stress relief. Big
Yeah, yeah,
stress
of
relief.
course. Yeah, and it's actually very important for the, newer generation who really want to be a martial art instructor. They can definitely take the lesson from your experience on this.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely not. You don't want to just jump into it, and you got to find your teaching style. You
That's
got
also
to. I
true.
mean, I've changed that several times through the years.
Right.
Of how I'm showing people stuff and what works, what doesn't, my own experiences. So, that's the other thing. You might be the best practitioner in the world, but if you can't relay what you know to others to help them grow, then maybe the instructor role isn't your spot. And that's sometimes a hard thing to swallow for some practitioners, for sure.
Right. So, as you said that there are any, in the evolution of your training style, there are a lot of things that you have adopted and kind of shed off also to make it more streamlined and more attractive. So people when they actually come to learn martial art, they get very excited. They have a certain amount of mindsets, and you always confront that with those students, like what kind of mindsets they're bringing in. So what kind of misconceptions they have in their mind when they come.
A lot of people, I think, come in thinking it's going to be quick. You're going to learn something really fast, and then like, hey, I'm good. And that's completely not the case. I always tell people, learning the martial arts, it's like running a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's time and consistency. That's the secret to this, is getting good. And the other thing is, don't think that just because you put in a lot of time that you're now invincible. Because nothing is guaranteed. Like, it's another little analogy I use to people is when you come and train martial arts, you're basically just putting a better hand for you at the craps table. That's all you're doing. You're just bettering your odds if a situation does arise where you have to actually use your self-defense. So that's one of the biggest things is people thinking they're just going to be, invincible and that it's fast. And those, I think people find that out, within the first couple weeks. Because usually, people are coming in through the door because they're excited. They've watched the UFC, or maybe they've had a personal experience where something happened to them, and then that's what gets them in the door. But then what makes that door so revolving, why we lose a lot of students, is because they realize how hard it is. I mean, it's a commitment, and that's what a lot of people don't want to put that in. They're wanting that quick fix, get good now, so then I'm okay and I feel more secure, when it's a constant process. So once you quash those and people get past that, they usually stick with it. So
Right. So how do you do that? How do you is it like uh, everybody is not built the same way, and some people will always leave anyway. But how do you find that particular motivation in the students, or is it that you actually generate in them, or is it that they have to have that motivation from their own side anyway?
you kind of hit it right there. There's a lot. You have to have that internal motivation. I mean, I'll help you with the process. And that's the big thing, is what, especially with a new student, when they come in, I don't want to overwhelm them. Because some people who come in the door, they've maybe never even thrown a jab, so it's, to me, I think that's something so natural and basic because I've been doing it so long. But you got to understand, the person who just walks in, they've maybe never done that. They've never thrown a punch. They've never raised their leg up other than walking. So you just got to a lot of what I do with the students like that to keep the motivation is just let them move, just moving around, because that's the most important, is keeping hands up. And I mean, you remember that from a lot of my classes, is just move and keep your hands up.
Yeah.
Just learn that, and then everything else, it'll come natural. It's learning a skill. It takes time. And I think that's the thing. What I do with them is just keep it, don't overload them. Don't throw a lot of stuff at them, and just keep encouraging that it will come. You will get comfortable. And a lot of times, I tell people it takes a good solid year of training before if this is for a new person, a good solid year before you actually get comfortable with it and start to enjoy the process a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that my hands used to drop as well, quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
and that's the most important.
right.
Keep them up and move. Keep them up and move.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So alongside this whole, fighting styles, which they are actually self-defense mostly, but in ancient times as well, martial art has always become quite intertwined with a lot of meditation. So, did you actually incorporate meditation in your style as well? Is it actually part of jiu-jitsu, that kind of styles as well?
It's not something that's really taught or that I teach, but it is something I do practice, because I actually, a lot of people don't know, I did actually receive a black belt in Kung Fu as well.
Okay.
So I learned a lot of moving meditations, how to, a lot of breathing exercises, and it's something I do on my own. It's more my internal training, my personal training. So it's not something that I really, I share with students. I mean, if they ask and want to know a little bit of what I do, I can share with them that. But I'm a believer in it, of just relaxation and just getting that mental focus and clarity. But it's not something that I incorporate into my program.
Okay. Okay. So here comes some of the, how would I say it, very interesting side of martial art that we generally observe in movies, such as something fantastic. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's it goes. The best analogy I heard of is going back to Bruce Lee. That's where a lot of people got exposed to the martial arts because of Enter the Dragon, Game of Death, and those movies. And what they would see is the flashy kicks,
Right.
the screaming, and that is completely opposite of how Bruce Lee was. Because fortunately for me, with training with Daninosanto so much, I was able to get a lot of inside uh, practices of how Bruce would fight, and situations that he'd been in where Mr. Inosanto had been right there with him. And kind of how Dan explained it is, you have theatrical martial arts and practical martial arts, and that's what you see on TV. Of course, is the theatrical side. Not that saying that none of what you're seeing on TV is practical, but how Bruce was streamlined. They say he would, he's showing in his movies a lot of kicks, spinning kicks, and flashing around. When they say when it really came down to it, is he would straight blast, clinch the person up, take them down, or knock them out. It was fast. He would try to end it quickly. So, you gotta love Hollywood, because it does bring people in. That's what gets them interested. But it can be a downside, because people think that's what martial arts is, and it's not.
Right. So this is actually very important part for everybody to know who is interested in martial art, that how actually you should treat martial art, so that you don't get confused with the what you see in the screen and what's the real life is.
Yeah.
So another thing I was wondering that, so there are a lot of Japanese style. I know you told me that, yeah, you actually practiced karate at a very beginning. Have you tried anything else after that?
I can't even remember. I wish I knew I remember the instructor, Gary Fuquay, but I forgot what system of karate it was. Maybe a Shotokan or something, but that was when I was very young. I mean, this was YMCA. I was a little kid, maybe 6. And I did, why I got it, I did White Tiger Kung Fu, and that's where I actually obtained the rank. They call it Shidai, which is translated into training a little brother, which is equivalent of, you could say, it was a black sash, but you could call it a black belt. And I got into that because my first instructor, Alex, always told me, he says, because he came from a Taekwondo background. He was well versed in that. He was a high level. He was, I think, at one time ranked like 4th in the nation for Taekwondo of, sparring. So he was very versed in that. And he always told me, aside from the jeetkunedo and the Filipino martial arts, he says, research something else. So you can kind of have a relation and kind of see and to share with people, what has worked for you and what doesn't. And that's why I kind of dove into it. So I was training the Kung Fu about 4 days a week while I was still doing my Jeet Kune Do studies. And I also had a close friend in college named Matt Leggins who was really skilled at 5 animal Kung Fu. And I did probably about 6 months with him, training in 5 animal Kung Fu. I just wasn't a fan of it. I didn't like it. I mean, we trained together all the time. I'd work my skills, he would work his. We're just kind of it wasn't getting together and sparring. It was just kind of sharing ideas. But those were the ones that I actually would say I trained in, kind of studying it a little bit. I did judo for a little bit. I don't even really count that because I maybe lasted a couple months with that because I just did not enjoy getting thrown. it wasn't fun for me. It was rough on you. So but I did get a good taste of it. I, retained a few things from it and some of the ideas. But aside from that, that's it. I mean, it's a lot, but it's what I did.
Right. So, because you said that there are certain types of martial arts you didn't like the, as you mentioned, 5 animal kung fu style. So, what's the reason for that?
I think martial arts to me is a lot of like style to people. Why we choose certain types of clothing or certain type of foods that we like. I think it's just what catches you, and it just did not catch me. Do I think it's functional? Absolutely, because Matt and his instructor, his name was Brian Snap. They were 2 of the most talented martial artists I think I've ever come across. They were very functional in what they could do. To me, it was just I didn't like the training mentality. It was a lot more of they would practice stances, which I get the idea of it because they were all about, being rooted and, everything from the ground. It just, to me, I was fast, I was small, so I wanted to be on my feet more like a boxer. So that's where I gravitated more towards that because it's just my interest. So that's why I always tell people never knock the system, just because it isn't for you. Somebody else might make it very functional. And those 2 did, because some people they see, it just at bird's eye view of Kung Fu, you think it's just kind of crazy hand movements and this and that. But when you'd see these 2 practice, they would change your mind. They were very talented. So that was a good eye opener training with those guys.
Okay. So that's actually a very interesting thought. So with the Japanese martial art, one martial art you always see in Hollywoods again, which is ninjutsu. So is it really a style?
From what I know of it, it's a lot of that is just reading because I've never actually personally trained with someone who trained in ninjutsu, but a lot of it is kind of a blend of they have takedowns, they do a lot of karate based stuff. So I'm not too familiar with it, but to me, it's kind of a blend of a lot of Japanese styles. The whole secret society of what the ninjas were, of the sent out for assassins and this and that. You hear about what they were. So I wouldn't be the one to really, this was all just kind of or things that I've read about that I know about it. But they do incorporate. They have judo style techniques in it because they will throw you using the lapels. They have grappling technique as well, and they'll strike. But as far as what specifically they're pulling from, I don't know. It's just something I haven't really researched as much into.
Okay.
It's interesting. Oh, ninjutsu stuff is interesting. I always tried to act like a ninja when I was a kid, but I never
Yeah,
trained it.
they have all different types of what you call mudras, right? With different hand gestures and everything. So, sometimes I do see that in YouTube videos that these styles, these kind of mudras actually work and generate this type of energy and all those things. So this kind of goes into the near the mystical realm again, the fantastical and mystical realm of martial arts. I was wondering that how actually that is really working in that sense, but it is very secretive for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not, and it's something, again, I'm not going to say I'm not a believer. You hear the chi or ki, whatever, you decide you want to call the kind. I've always been in what's real before me and what I'm seeing. And I think the whole, that's the one thing, I call it the Spike TV generation. When Spike TV started coming out with the Ultimate Fighter series and seeing MMA actually on the big screen, aside from just the UFC's pre that, they're seeing how these people are training. Then people started, you got more of a fan base, so they started watching it more and seeing like, oh, this is the stuff that works. Again, it's controlled. It's you have rules, but as far as the closest thing aside from going down to your local tavern and getting into a fight is watching a UFC fight, because they're going at it. They're striking, they're kicking, they're clinching, they're taking down to the ground. You can elbow. Yes, you can't bite, you can't eye gouge, you can't do a lot of the things, and there's no weapons involved like in the street, but the proof is in the pudding. You're seeing what works on the big screen. And I think, in my opinion, that's what kind of demystified the whole, secretive of, the chi and ki and what people can do with the death touches and stuff like that you hear about. Uh, I've never seen any of it firsthand. I've had some, higher level karate guys try to do little pressure point things on me, and it just, I don't know. It's not something that I gravitated towards. And again, not knocking it. Good for them. They're having fun
sure,
training, and that's what's important.
sure.
But it's just not me and not what I was looking for. I've always been into what works, what's going to work for me,
Right.
and that's why I've stayed with the arts that I've been with.
And it's probably not going to be very helpful on the street, right? Because how fast you can find a pressure point to strike effectively.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. That's why my whole thing within a street is just get moving. Know your surroundings, be looking around, know what's going on, try to throw some punches to get them off of you. Hopefully, it doesn't get taken to the ground, because nobody usually hangs out alone. You always have to worry about the buddy coming up and kicking you upside the head if you get to the ground. So
Right.
you don't want to take a street fight to the ground. And yeah, I'm not going to be fishing around for a pressure point if somebody's trying to attack me. I'm trying to end it quickly as fast as I can to create distance and get away. So yeah, it's just never been a thing. You always kind of looked into it, just from all the, the training through the years I've done of seeing, you hear these stories of what these, grandmaster kung fu people have done with their hands, and, the no touch shots and stuff, but it's not been something I've been focused on or really stuck with or researched, I should say.
Sure, sure. That makes sense. We are almost, coming to an end, but of this interview, and I was wondering, you have such a long experience. Do you have any fun experience during those times?
Oh man, I think, wow, because I want to say one of the, because like I was telling you, really how Filipino martial arts has always been my passion, and I remember this was probably early 2000s, maybe around 2000, somewhere in between 2004 and 2006. I remember being out in California at the Inosanto Academy, getting ready to take a Filipino martial arts class. And I'm just sitting there, kind of waiting. And then I look over and I see, a heavier set guy walk in. I'm like, oh my God, that's Chris Sayok, the owner of Sayok, or I'm sorry, the creator, the founder of Sayok Kali.
Okay.
And I've always been fascinated with Sayok Kali because they're very, very talented with knife work. And knife has always been one of my favorite parts of Filipino martial arts. And I remember he came and he sat directly behind me, and Guru Inosanto came over and started talking to him, and I heard him, kind of talking, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll teach the class." So the class I was getting ready to take was with the founder of SWAT Kali, and I got to take it. And that was probably, one of the many cool experiences of, just being with somebody at just that high level. I mean, that's the master at that level. I mean, he's the founder of a system, and one that I respected very much, and I'd never got to train in it. So what better opportunity than the founder of the system getting to take a class with him? It was really cool. That was probably one of them that, sticks out the most. And then another, I got to actually, another situation at the Inosanto Academy, I got to roll with Jean-Jacques Machado, and it was a short time after he had received his coral belt. I remember sitting there, because we were taking a class with him before we were going to train with Guru Dan, and we're just sitting there, everybody kind of open rolling, and I'm, sitting down. He kind of looks over at me and says, "Hey, would you like to train?" And I just remember, like, oh my God, because this is like getting to go play some pickup game if you're a basketball player with Michael Jordan. I mean, that's how Jean-Jacques Machado is. Just he's the man. He's awesome, and that was another very cool experience to get actually to feel his energy and just see how talented a man of that level is. It was awesome. It was really cool.
Thanks for sharing those stories. Really appreciate that. So, what are the most important life lessons you got from doing martial art?
True dedication and perseverance. That's the big, is just, and having that mental game. And because we all fall on hard times, have hard issues that come up. And I think, when you get dedicated to anything, it doesn't have to be martial arts. I mean, it could be somebody who's played the guitar for 30 years, even if he, doesn't get that record deal or whatever, he still trains it with passion and enjoyment. He's learned dedication and perseverance. And I think that's what martial arts has done for me. Is it's so much now a part of my life. I wouldn't know, and I've done it majority of my life, I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't have it. And so I think that's the biggest take from it, is just knowing that, whatever you put, even if I'm not a world champion, I'm not anything like that, but, I've stayed with it this long, battled injuries and still stuck with it, and had training partners come and go, and I'm still here, and I'm not ever stopping.
Right.
So,
wow.
yeah.
For sure. So, what are the motivations that you get, to stay in this path? So, is it always came from within you?
It's kind of, when it started, it was, kind of selfish reasons to better myself, get myself better, and to be able to defend myself, help with my job. And now it's more of my enjoyment, and what keeps my drive is, of course, the knowledge, because there's always something to learn. There's always something to train with, and the health benefits that you get from martial arts. But my satisfaction right now is seeing, from what I've learned from standing, on the backs of other giants through all these years and sharing it with my students, and then actually seeing them perform it, that's my kick right now. That's where I love, is just, kind of sharing my experiences with my students, seeing the light bulb click on their head, and seeing them, make relationships in the gym with people who they never would have met unless they walked in my door. That's my enjoyment. That's what keeps me going every day. That's what motivates me to, change and better my curriculum, and is helping my students and seeing them succeed. And maybe they'll take a path like me one day, where they're staying with it after 30 years, even banged up and injured, they're still going. So that's what ticks me every day.
Wow. I actually have to admit that I have seen certain aspects of your training, and I really admire, especially when you have so much knowledge and so much depth as well, and you are very detailed oriented as well. So when you corrected my stances here and there, like tiny movements, that makes a significant improvement. So that I really appreciate. And on top of that, also I appreciate is that you encourage. So instead of discouraging somebody, you encourage and try to motivate. So that's actually really a positive side that I haven't found really before this, before I actually trained with you. So I
I
really
appreciate
appreciate
that.
that. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the biggest thing. And Kurt, just keep moving. Just keep going.
Yeah,
You'll get better. I promise you. The process will come. You just got to stay with it. You got to stay with
sure.
it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for the new martial artist, what would be your advice?
Just come in the door. Just find what your motivate. Well, what is it you're wanting to do? Because I get the calls from new students all the time, and I always ask them like, well, what's your interest? Because everybody has a different reason why they're coming in. They want to compete, they want to learn how to defend themselves, or they just want to get out of the house a couple nights a week. So kind of find what your goal is, then come in and just check it out. Check other schools out too. I'm not, I boast about our school a lot because we do offer a lot, but we might not be your fit. We might not be what you're looking for. So always go watch a class, see how the instructor is, relaying the information, and maybe even take the class. I always tell people to watch it because then you can kind of take it all in and see how everybody's training together. Because a lot of times, if you're new, you come in and you do a trial class, you're just focused. Your whole goal is like, oh, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to mess this up. And, but if you sit and actually take it in and watch what's going on, you might get a better idea if that is your fit or not. But that's the biggest thing is just, find what you want to do and get in the door and show up. That's all there is because everybody started new at some point. So you just get in the door.
Right. So, wow, that's really important. Could you give like about 3 to 5 tips for new students? Say, for example, one thing that you actually provided me with is always keep your hands up. So that's one very important tip for sure. If you can give the audience.
You definitely the hands up is the most important, and the second I would say is moving. Get footwork down because you can't stay planted. You got to be able to move. And some people say, "Well, my knees are hurt or this or that." Well, I mean, if that's a limitation, you have to work with and overcome because the fighting game is that it's fast, it's moving. You got to just have that footwork is the most important. That's your base is hands up, footwork, and move. And start simple. Start with just throwing a jab. Start with just throwing a shuffle groin kick for the legs. Just things nice and simple, just to kind of get your comfort. And then the other magic thing is keep coming, keep doing it, because everything will come in time. And that's the process is the time and consistency, and everything will morph from that. But I can't even really sit here and say there's 3 to 5 most important. I say it's just like you've heard me say it time and time again: is hands up and move, and keep coming, keep showing up because you'll get better.
Those are the very important one. Like hands up and move is the best way to avoid any kind of injuries. The first thing, yes, that's actually very important. So, and this is the question that I am having for some time. Say, for example, it's probably the question not really about in techniques. It's mostly about like a kind of a mentality, kind of a question that if you are actually confronting or somebody is confronting you on the street, and these are, say, for example, not really thugs. These are some kind of like a bar fight or anything. So how do you actually approach that and really, I don't know whether, I mean, whether you actually go for confrontation at first or really try to avoid the situation and keep the confrontation as a last resort, and how do you approach the whole thing?
Yeah, avoidance is the best. That's like it's kind of it sounds cliche, but avoid and run if you can. I mean, there's no because nobody wins in the fight. You're gonna get hurt. I mean, even if you do come out on top and win, your hand's gonna be hurt from punching the person. You're more than likely probably going to the ground, so you're gonna get scuffed up. Then you got to worry about legal issues. So the best thing to do is just try to have good verbiage, be able to talk, just get away with it. If somebody's coming up and approaching me, like, man, I don't want to fight you. You probably beat my butt. I don't do it. You just kind of, I don't want to say be submissive, but try to just deflect it. Because you don't, I mean, just through the years too of being a police officer, of just, dealing with all the fights that we saw, victims, and there's not a win in it. So if you can avoid it, it's doing simple things of just, if you see somebody who looks, just, you get that bad spidey sense, just go the other side of the street. Just little easy tactics that, it's nothing magical, nothing mystical, but it's just simple common sense street approach is what it is. And just use the fighting as the last resort. And then if you can at that point, then you got to find an equalizer. That's why, because you don't know how many people are going to have. That's why a lot of people carry knives. Have the knife, ready if you have to defend yourself, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's not like being in the ring where, it's just you and your opponent, and you're focusing in on the prize money and the win to get the belt. Whereas the street, it could be life or death, and it can go that quick.
Right.
So that's the biggie, is just avoid it at all costs. Use it as a last resort. Just try not to put yourself. I know sometimes situations are just going to come up on you, but if you can, don't put yourself in a situation. It's not worth it. Not worth it at all.
So yeah, so that's actually very important. And of course, we all have sixth sense, or as Andy said, the spidey sense. So use that. If you see that, definitely try to exclude yourself from any confrontation. So that's the first.
Always trust the gut.
Right.
Always trust the gut.
Right. And then definitely, but if by any chance you cannot avoid, this kind of trainings are actually very helpful during that time, so that you know that what to do if you are in a situation where you cannot avoid anything. Yeah, so we are actually at a very end. So if you actually want to say something and would like to, how students can contact you, that would be very helpful, actually.
Yeah, the best thing I tell folks to do is we're on Facebook, and I have my personal page, which is Andrew Sabens, and I also have our business page, which is Sabens Martial Arts Academy. And you can kind of see videos and clips of that too. I do a lot of those just so people can visually see what we're doing. And other options people can contact me is my email, which is at asabens@yahoo.com. And my phone number is 618-559-5239. And they can contact me anytime, answer any questions, and give you information. Hopefully come train with us.
Yeah. And I definitely can tell everybody that Andy is very welcoming. He actually gets back to you, even if he cannot actually attend the phone right away. He will get back to you in next few minutes to few hours for sure. So there is no problem with that.
Absolutely.
And I will also put the Facebook link, the business website link, his email, and his phone number in the description, so that you can definitely contact him if you want to join his classes. His classes are also, if you can tell us that what kind of classes you offer and which days and what times.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do a striking program, which is a blend of Muay Thai and Western boxing. And I throw a little bit of Panatukan in there as well, some Filipino boxing. We have a no-gi submission grappling, which is ground fighting. And then we have the sport Brazilian Jiu Jitsu class. Classes meet Tuesdays and Thursdays. We run from 6 to 9 o'clock. And we also have an open gym on Mondays that meets at 10 a.m. And we've added a Monday class at 5 p.m., which is the Kali, and that's included for members. But I do allow people who are non-members to come to that class, and it's just a $20 drop-in if they do. So they are more than welcome to come and partake in that as well, even if you aren't a member.
All right. Yeah, so that's the end of this podcast. Please, join us for many of these kind of interesting podcasts, our channel, Sapien, and we'll upload every podcast on every Sunday. So thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you, Andy.
You got it. Thank you. I appreciate it.